Okay, so the Celtics force a game seven in another very weird playoff game where this thing went from, oh, it seems like the Celtics might run away with this based on the first 15 minutes or whatever, where, the Time Lord adjustment, having him play off of PJ Tucker. Tucker made a couple of threes, but the amount of plays that help defense, we'll get to that in a second. Then it goes to, wait a minute, Jason Tatum's potentially going to have like the worst game you could possibly ask for out of a star player in a closeout game. And then he goes nuts in the fourth quarter, and the Sixers' offense falls apart. And I am left saying, I'm happy that they won. I also still have no idea how they won this game. Okay, let's talk about the Time Lord stuff first, because I don't know. I need to go to that for whatever reason. Just the amount of possessions where it was like getting that extra contest on Embiid, or getting a floater out of like Maxey, or forcing like a pass out. Like the one play I remember the most, it was like Rob comes over off of PJ Tucker, and then. Or actually, Tucker was in the dunker spot, and then Embiid throws it to PJ Tucker. Rob gets it, goes back to Tucker. It goes back to Embiid. It becomes a turnover, whatever. That was, the double big move from Missoula. That was a good move. We also got a few Time Lord alley-oops, which is always my favorite thing because it means, hey, a little bit more juice at the basket. I love it. Because after the last game, I was like, oh, man, I don't know am I just asking too much out of Rob to be just that sort of release valve, if you will, for more stuff at the rim. And then we get to Tatum, who, man... When he turned it over with Niang on him, when he got the Niang switch, or when he took that three in transition and then he passed out of it and it became a turnover, or then when it was the clear path foul, I was just like, man, I do not want to read the internet if this game is going to end up being the way that it looked like at that point. I was ready to just not look up a single Jason Tatum take by anybody. I did not want to deal with it, even if I was also going to criticize him pretty heavily myself. And then in that fourth quarter, okay, so we get he screens from Marcus or whatever it was to get the Maxey switch, makes a three over him, makes a three over Embiid in the corner, which the second he shot it, I was like, Tatum, please no. And then it drops. I'm like, okay. This was in the middle of me being like, can we get something going for Jalen, please? I think there were actually 2 threes over Maxey where it's a similar thing. Tatum screening for Marcus or the other way around, which that to me is always like my favorite play that they run. And it seems like they don't get to it enough until like the fourth quarter unless they got to it earlier and I'm just not remembering. Speaking of Jalen, I remember, 3 or 4 times where he just kind of had to power himself to the basket, even with Embiid kind of all over him. The one I remember most was like a Rob Embiid sort of handoff action from the wing where Joel was all over him. He got a physical layup. Also want to give Marcus his flowers. He had some catch and shoot threes. He also had like 1 3 that I wasn't a fan of, but he had some good catch and shoots in transition especially. I feel like he had a floater bank shot versus an Embiid drop, which, I would not bank on the odds of that happening all the time, but it happened on that play. And also like another layup over Tobias in the fourth. But anyway, we got to talk about the Sixers offense. So in the fourth quarter, I think they had 4 buckets by the end. I think that was the stat at the bottom. But I'm trying to remember the 4 buckets. I think they were 3 Embiid face-up jumpers over mostly Al Horford, although one of them was over Brogdon. And I think the other one was Maxey attacking from the corner when it was the Harden Embiid pick and roll. And then I think it might have been Rob playing off of him a little bit. Swing to Maxey, attacks, layup. There you go. And besides that, I don't know if they made a bucket. Now, there was that one where Harden slipped, and he said it was a foul on Marcus, and I think it might have been something with like their feet getting tangled up. I don't know there. I remember one where they collapsed what felt like the entire team on Embiid at the basket to get a miss out of him. And then there was one Harden Embiid pick and roll where I think Horford was just in a drop and Embiid missed the pull-up jumper over him. And then besides that, I think what I remember is like, if I'm not mistaken, I think Melton missed a few threes with Rob playing off of him. I'm going to have to go back and look at just Philly's fourth quarter offense, but, that one went from this is going to be a disaster for the Celtics to that was a disaster for Philly. And now we go into a Game 7 in Boston where I guess you expect Time Lord once again to be starting. And I know at one point in this game he was plus 1 million when he was on the court, and I understand plus minus individual game, but like, the stats backed up the eye test. Like the help defense he provided definitely made a difference, even if like PJ Tucker made a couple of threes off with him playing off of him and stuff. And so if you're Philly, I think the first potential thing there is like, do you pull PJ Tucker for the sake of more shooting to make it more difficult for Rob to be in that help defense role? Because like, as we all know, that's by far the best use of him defensively. I mean, the other thing it does too is it kind of allows Horford to sort of stick to Embiid a little bit more when it comes to the Harden Embiid 2-man game or the Maxey Embiid 2-man game, because he knows like, oh, Rob's going to be back there, You're potentially giving up a driving lane, but again, you trust Rob and stuff. So that's the first potential thing. The other thing is, I'm constantly thinking about Embiid's rim protection in this series, and, going into it, I'm not going to say fear, but the question there was like, okay, what's the balance between Embiid providing stuff at the rim versus like he's got to play off of Horford? Is Horford going to make threes? Although there were some plays here where it felt like he was playing off of Marcus or Derek White a little bit. I'd have to go back and check. Maybe it was happening more than I initially noticed it was, I guess. But I think Philly has done, for the most part, a good job. And like, if he's got to play off of Horford, somebody else is going to be closing out or whatever, or just covering for him on the help. And so he's contesting a lot at the rim. He's forcing guys to pass out a shot sometimes. And so the Celtics, they're still going to have to deal with that. I mean, I would imagine that Game 7 is going to be a good game, but at the same time, if you're Philly, man, that is as good of an opportunity as you could possibly blow. With Tatum playing that bad for 75% of the game, looking completely out of it. I know he was doing stuff defensively and his passing and all that, I know. And I guess if you want to, like, if you really want to get into the weeds of it, you could say, well, they were also down by like 15 points in the first half, and a lot of that because they weren't ready for Rob, with his help defense and all that. So, that matters as well. But really, like, the Sixers should have won this game. So here we go, Game 7. I don't know how the hell we got here, but we got here.